You're listening to Procurement 6, the weekly podcast from the team at Art of Procurement that summarizes this week in procurement in just 6 short segments.
Hi there. My name is Kelly Barner, and today is Friday, January 3rd, 2025.
6.
To open this episode of Procurement 6, I'd like to wish all of you a very happy new year. I hope you had a wonderful time with friends and family, maybe engaged in some time-honored traditions, and are now ready to get back at it. Welcome to 2025.
5.
In this week's episode of the Art of Procurement podcast, we shared a Mastermind Live session featuring Aaron Adicote, director at Alex Partners. Aaron used the opportunity of the session to share his perspective on creating excitement around procurement transformation. I asked him if it mattered whether the catalyst for change was inside of procurement or whether it came from the company at large. Let's listen to what he had to say.
So we know everything's going to change. Sometimes that change will come from things in our personal life. My need to balance my looking after my daughter with my job and with other commitments I have, or that may change in what I can do in a given moment in a job. It may be that the business is desiring procurement, me, to do something different in order to fulfill a need that they have, or it could be my leaders in the procurement function that are, ideal. It could be me provoking us to do something different. Right? So all of this will be happening. I don't necessarily think about it as much where it comes from. It's more how you decide to show up and interface with that and embrace it or not. Now, that said, you can have times when the change is something that you don't believe is the right thing versus something that else you think should be changing. And so there's absolutely, I think, space for some healthy debate, perhaps. And in that, you will hopefully find some growth and the ability to maybe shift your position in what's happening. Maybe you can have a point of view, make a really good argument, and that gives you the opportunity to do something different in terms of that work than was originally planned. Now you have a bit of ownership in it and it feels a bit more. So I think there is an element of, mastering your own destiny, a sense of showing up, being engaged in the conversation about what the change should be and the nature of it, how you do it. But if this is one of the things, you ask me why I love what I love doing. Actually, the real core of it is I want people to turn up and want to do what we're trying to do. And therefore, there's lots of ways you can do that by soliciting their ideas and input, by supporting them, giving them praise. There's lots of ways you can do that. The engagement is the key thing. The idea that you can just sit there and go, I'm not changing that. That's not going to get you very far.
To listen to the full episode, go to artofprocurement.com/podcast or search for Art of Procurement and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also click the link in today's show notes to go directly to this episode.
4.
In this week's episode of Art of Supply, I share one of my favorite things to do, rereading books I've read in the past. You do have to give it a bit of time, but a good book will completely change if you give it long enough between readings. In December, I was looking for inspiration, and I looked at the copy of Good to Great by Jim Collins that usually sits right behind me during my video shots, and I thought, I wonder. Good to Great was a project led by Jim Collins, but executed by a whole team. They identified 11 companies that had managed to achieve really notable stock returns in the 15 years following some sort of transitional event. Now, I haven't read this book in 20 years. I was in business school the last time I read it. I've learned a lot since then, both personally and professionally. I knew I would pick up on some things that didn't resonate with me the last time I read the book, but I didn't expect to find it as different as I did. This time around, the book wasn't about operational effectiveness. It was about leadership, and not in a trite managerial effectiveness sort of way. It was about leadership in a humble, determined, very human kind of way. And then a story hit the news that completely changed how I saw the book and the people who were featured in it once again. Listen to this week's episode to hear the lessons I think we can still draw from this book more than 20 years on, and what we can take away from it at the start of a new year. You'll find the episode linked in today's show notes, or you can find and subscribe to Art of Procurement wherever you get your audio entertainment.
This is Procurement 6 from Art of Procurement. To get notified every time an episode is published, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe. 3.
In this week's episode of the Sourcing Hero podcast, we shared excerpts from 3 of the most popular Chris Lance episodes from 2024. Chris is the Vice President and General Manager at Una, and for the last few years, I've had a recurring monthly conversation with him on the Sourcing Hero podcast, where we discuss current news stories, trends, and supply chain issues. In this first episode of the year, we get to hear Chris discussing the surging power of the podcast format, how to fight off professional inertia and fatigue and find joy in your work, and the launch of Chris's newsletter, which is a thought-provoking must-read for supply chain and procurement professionals. I'll share a link to that specific episode in today's show notes, but you can also find the Sourcing Hero podcast wherever you find your audio.
2.
I'm not really a horoscope person, but I have always found Nostradamus fascinating. I mean, who doesn't love a little doom now and then? So I looked up to see, out of curiosity, what did Nostradamus predict for 2025? Here's one of his predictions. Through long war, all the army exhausted, so that they do not find money for the soldiers. Instead of gold or silver, they will come to coin leather, Gallic brass, and the crescent sign of the moon. Could this be a reference to the end of the war in Ukraine? An article published by the New York Post, linked in today's show notes, seems to think so. The funny thing about Nostradamus is his predictions always seem to be the most clear in retrospect, when they don't actually really do much to help us with our planning. Now, he also wrote that in 2025, England would be beset by cruel wars and would face an ancient plague that would be worse than enemies. For the sake of my Art of Procurement teammates, I just hope he's not talking about the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup.
1.
Before I let you go, I want to remind you about Catalyst LA, Art of Procurement's first ever in-person event. We're hosting Catalyst LA on May 6th in Los Angeles, California. This executive summit is being designed specifically for procurement and digital transformation leaders to come together and share their vision for the future of procurement's operating models. Attendees will have the chance to collaborate with their peers, stress test their visions, and develop actionable strategies for their organizations. If you're a procurement or digital transformation executive interested in attending, click on the link in today's show notes to learn more and request an invitation.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you've enjoyed this pod, help us grow and tell your peers to search for Procurement 6 wherever they get their podcasts.